All right, we got Algebra 1, 2-5. Solving equations involving absolute value. Solving equations involving absolute value. So we're going to do a little bit of review here. And that is that the absolute value of -4 is 4. The absolute value of 3 is 3. The absolute value of a number is its distance from 0. So I can say the absolute value of -5 equals, so if I go to -5, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's -5. And I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's +5. The absolute value of -5, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is 5 away from 0. The absolute value of +5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is 5 away from 0. So the absolute value of a number is its distance to 0. All right. Or you can just think of it, if it's negative, it becomes positive. If it's positive, it stays positive. Either way is fine. Let's do an example. Evaluate this. So I've got the absolute value of m plus 6 minus 14 if m equals 4. So we have this expression. Notice there's no equal sign here, so it's not an equation, it's an expression. We're going to plug in 4 for m and see what we get. So plug in 4 for m, I get 4 plus 6 minus 14 equals the absolute value of 10 minus 14. The absolute value of 10 is 10, so 10 minus 14, and that my answer will be 4. 10 minus 14 is -4, sorry. 10 minus 14 is -4. There's my answer. You try this one. 23 minus the absolute value of 3 minus 4x if x equals 2. All right, so go ahead and do the same thing that we just did above. Plug in the number for the variable, and let's see what you get. All right, pause now and go. All right, let's see how you did. X equals 2, so I'm going to plug in 2 for x. 23 minus the absolute value of 3 minus 4 times 2. And that becomes 23 minus, I'm going to do what's inside the absolute value sign. We treat that as parentheses. So we're going to do what's in there before we do any adding, subtracting, or whatever outside. So 4 times 2 is 8. Absolute value of 3 minus 8. 23 minus 3 minus 8 is -5. So the absolute value of -5 is +5. 23 minus a +5. 23 minus +5 is 18. There we go. Hope you guys did well on that one. Let's move on. Solve absolute value equations. All right, let's get right to it here. So if I have the absolute value of x, and I say the absolute value of x equals 5, x can be -5 because the absolute value of -5 is 5. X could also be a +5 because the absolute value of +5 is 5. So we need to use this idea here when we do other equations. So for this one, x could be 5, or it could be negative 5. Negative 5 or 5, it could be either one of those, or it could be both of those, right? So let's go ahead and do an example of how we use this idea or this concept when we do equations that are a little bit more involved. So I've got f plus 5, absolute value of f plus 5 equals 17. So here's what I have to do. Anytime I see absolute value sign equals something, I've got to write two equations. One is f plus 5 equals 17. So I'm going to just drop the absolute value sign and write the equation just as it is, as if it didn't have the absolute value sign. On my other equation, though, I'm going to say f plus 5, what was inside there, equals negative 17. So I've got to solve for both of those. So now I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. F equals 12. And I am going to subtract 5 from both sides of this one. F equals negative 22. Right, so I have both of these. Now let's check both of these and see if they work. So if f is 12, 12 plus 5 is 17. Absolute value of 17 equals 17. That one looks good. Let's try negative 22 now. So negative 22 plus 5 is negative 17. The absolute value of negative 17, positive 17, check. That looks great. Okay, now you try one. X minus 5, absolute value of x minus 5 plus 2 equals 7. So this is a you try, but I'm going to give you a hint first before you get started. You need the absolute value all by itself on one side of the equal sign before you can do this split up trick deal. So you've got to subtract the 2 from each side before you can split this up into two equations. So the 2 goes away, 7 minus 2 is 5. Now you can split it up into two equations. Okay, go ahead and pause and finish this equation out. All right, so hopefully you drew two arrows and you said x minus 5 equals 5 and x minus 5 equals negative 5. You add 5 to both sides of this one, x equals 10. You add 5 to both sides of this one, x equals 0. So these are my answers, and then I went back to the original and checked, hopefully. So when x is 10, 10 minus 5 is 5, absolute value of 5 is 5, plus 2 is 7, that one looks good. When x is 0, that'll give me negative 5, and here absolute value of negative 5 is 5, 5 plus 2 is 7, boom, they both check out. All right, let's do another example. Down here, getting close to the end of my paper, b minus 1 equals negative 3. Now, this one, you might want to start, do arrows like this and do arrows like this and start working this out. Now, I'm going to stop you from all of that work because first, let's think about, is there a number that I could have, that I could take the absolute value of and get negative 3? So if I put 3 in here, that's going to just still give me positive 3. If I put negative 3 in the absolute value, I'm still going to get positive 3. So the answer to my question is no. I cannot plug any number in here and get negative 3 out of it. So this is no solution. If you have the absolute value of something equals a negative number, no solution every time. Let me give you one more to do on your own. Y plus 2, absolute value of y plus 2 equals 4. So go ahead and do this one, and then we'll look at it together. Pause and go. All right, hopefully you went like this. and you said y plus 2 equals 4, and y plus 2 equals negative 4. Subtract 2 from both sides, you get y equals 2 over here. Subtract 2 from both sides, you get y equals negative 6. Now I'm going to plug those back in. 2 plus 2 is 4. Absolute value of 4 is 4. Negative 6. Negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4. Absolute value of negative 4 is positive 4. These both check out. Now, you might see this in your book or in other places that my solution here for y is y equals 2 and negative 6. So this is my little solution set here. For this one back up here, it would be x equals 0 and 10. Those are my solutions. That's my solution set. So you might see it either of these ways. All right, let's keep going. 2-5, almost done with 2-5. Here we are going to write an absolute value equation. Write an absolute value equation. And here's your example. We're going to start with a number line, and the number line starts at 11. We're starting at 11, and we're going to 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So that's where our number line is. And we're going to say my midpoint, or this is how we're going to set up the equation. X minus my midpoint equals distance to the midpoint. So this is how we are going to, this is the formula that we're going to use to write an absolute value equation. So we're going to use this chart here to write an equation. So for this one, the midpoint between 11 and 19, so I could just say, like, if I'm not sure that 15 is the midpoint, so here are the two end points. So I'm going to say 11 plus 19 divided by 2. That's going to give me my midpoint, my two end points divided by 2. So 19 plus 11 is 30. 30 divided by 2 is 15. So that's my midpoint right there, 15. And so now I just use this formula, or let's find the distance too. All right, distance. My distance is my farther point, or my bigger point, subtracted by, my smaller point, my lesser point, subtracted from my larger point, or my greater point. So that is going to give me 19 minus 11. And then I also need to divide this by 2 because that's the distance. I don't want the total distance. I want the distance to the midpoint, remember? So not the total distance. So let's divide that by 2 so that we get the distance just to the midpoint, not the total distance. So 19 minus 11 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So that is the distance from the midpoint to the end point, from the midpoint to the end point. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I can write my equation now. So the midpoint is 15, so I just say x minus 15, the absolute value of x minus 15 equals the distance to the midpoint, which is 4. Okay, so that's a bit of a mess, but let's see if we can do this together here one more time, and then you'll do a U-try and we'll be all done. So we're going to write an absolute value equation based on these points, 5 and 15. All right, so 5 and 15. So remember, here's our equation, x minus the midpoint absolute value of that equals the distance to the midpoint. So here are 2 points. We need to find the midpoint. And the way we do that is we say this number plus this number, the 2 endpoints, divided by 2 equals, so that's 20 divided by 2, which is 10. So my midpoint is 10. There's my midpoint. And I want to find my distance from the midpoint to the end point. Now, we did it up here. We took the 2 endpoints and we subtracted them. What I can do, instead of doing that, if I wanted to, I could take one endpoint and subtract the midpoint from it, right? 15 minus 10 equals 5, equals, oh no, I can't do that. Why would I? Yeah, that's the distance here, 5. So, or I could subtract these two. 15 minus 5 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So either way, it's fine. So there's my distance to the midpoint. And then there's my midpoint. So now I just plug that into my original equation. Absolute value of x minus my midpoint, which is 10, equals the distance from my midpoint to my endpoint, which is 5. And there I have my absolute value equation. Let's have you do one on your own. So I would like you to do to write an equation, an absolute value equation, based on these 2 points, 3 and 11. And pause and go. All right, let's see how you did. Let's find the midpoint. So the midpoint is 11 plus 3 over 2. I just took my 2 endpoints, find my midpoint, add them together, and divide by 2. 14 over 2 equals 7. So 7 is my midpoint. And now I need to find the distance between my midpoint and my endpoint. So 11 minus 7 equals 4. Or 3 plus 11, or 11 minus 3 over 2. So 11 minus 3 is 8, divided by 2 is going to get me 4. And now I can write my equation. Absolute value of x minus my midpoint, which is 7, equals the distance from my midpoint to my endpoint, which is 4. And that is how to write an absolute value equation. And that is all she wrote for 2-5.